welcome to the Modern Renaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ashlee Haze, with a special episode, which is a recording of my new workshop offering, The Art of the Audit. I had the opportunity to pilot this presentation as a part of Roots Week 2025, a week-long gathering of Southern artists and cultural workers in Arden, North Carolina. In this lecture, I provide tools to help individuals identify areas where fear and obligation may be fueling their actions and shift to a culture where love and passion guide them. These tools can be applied to our work lives, creative endeavors, and even financial affairs. Thank you, Alternate Roots, for the space to offer this work. And to the listeners of the Modern Renaissance Podcast, know that I am working on returning to this platform. I'll have to tell you a lot when I am back, but for now, I invite you to sit with this presentation and take an opportunity to audit any area of your life that you think needs some more curiosity. I look forward to returning to this microphone again soon. In the meantime, remember to hydrate, moisturize, mind your business, and do what you can with what you have. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashlee Haze, and I am presenting today a presentation called The Art of the Audit. Give me a second here. I'm waiting for it to appear on screen. There we go. Getting curious about our individual and collective cultures and practices with me, Ashlee Haze. A lot of folks hear the word audit and they immediately think finance, but today we're not talking about the financial parts of the audit. We're talking about audit everything we do outside of our money. And we're talking about that on a micro level and a macro level. So I've divided it into 4 parts. Intro to auditing, I'm gonna just talk about the process. MK's like, I'm talking about auditing tomorrow. I'm like, we're not talking about the money stuff. Barriers to alignment and connection. What keeps us in the way of doing what we are intending to do? How do we foster connection and alignment? And how do we evaluate findings from an audit and reckon with recommendations? I am the type of presenter, I love dialogue in the space. So if there's ever a moment where you're like, well, Ashlee, I have a question, or Ashlee, I have something that I'd love to add to that, please. It makes me feel better. I'm a poet. We live off of audience interaction. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about me first. I've gotta be like, trying to make sure my clicker works. There we go. There we go. It's just a little behind. So how do we get here? First of all, one thing that I think is important to know about me is that I have a bachelor's in philosophy, a BA in philosophy. That means I got a degree in thinking. So my background was ethics, social contract, and interpersonal agreements. So I'm always fascinated by what drives people's actions. What agreements have we made that justify those actions? Are we acting without agreements? So I'm often fascinated by that. I started a brand called Modern Philosophy, which migrated to Modern Renaissance. I wanted a way for people to be able to discuss and create new cultures and reimagine our interactions. I'm a lover of elephants in the room since 1992. Since I could talk, I have been like, does anybody else see that elephant in the room? My mom tells all the time I have stories about being a kid and just saying the thing that, maybe you're not supposed to say. I have a tendency to overfunction. I'm always thinking, always thinking. If I'm not thinking, I'm thinking about what I should be thinking about. But I have a desire to thrive and connect, to live beyond survival, and to truly be connected with people and to myself. I love systems and processes. That's what makes me a good project manager. I love just figuring out how the pieces work together. And I'm a practicing artist who is now working in nonprofit. So all of that has led me to the work that you will hear today. And I thought it was good to kind of inform you on the space. Sorry, y'all, this clicker's a little bit behind. Let's start with the art of the audit. Actually, I don't know if it's working at all, so could y'all click me next? There we go. One of my favorite quotes is this: the most dangerous of all behaviors may consist of doing things because we're supposed to. by Marshall Rosenberg. It is written in his book, Nonviolent Communication. And it has been a new guiding light for me, for myself, is to question, why am I doing things? Do I feel like there's an underlying obligation to do it? Do I feel like I actually genuinely want to do it and it brings me joy? And so we're gonna talk about how we choose other ways to inform what we do. Next slide, please. So an audit, a systematic review or assessment of something. Easy enough, right? We take a system, we review what we're doing, and we assess it. It's commonly used to describe financial audits. The process of auditing can be applied to non-financial transactions, interpersonal culture, and communication, as well as self-auditing our individual actions and transactions. I believe every action is a transaction. We communicate with people out of need or desire. I talk to you because I want something. So we talk about how we measure those transactions a bit. Next slide, please. The foundation of an audit is asking questions. How did we get here? How did this happen? Is this working? How can we improve and better align with our goals and values? Values is going to be a hot word this week. An audit is intended to interrupt the status quo and paint a picture of where we are, and more importantly, where we want to go, and versus where we want it to be. Next slide, please. For this workshop, I invite you to begin auditing your inner world and thoughts, your home life, your personal relationships, your artistic practice and your goals, your work in the world. A good audit begins by taking a sample. Take a sample of actions that you complete often and frequently. Micro transactions to macro, your small routines versus your vocation. Everything from what you eat for breakfast. Do I really like eating this for breakfast? Am I doing this because my mom made me eat it for 30 years? I want to do something different. Audit your vocation. I'm a poet. I started as a poet. It's always been my creative practice. Then COVID hit, and I had to ask myself a lot of questions, especially because I didn't have an audience and I didn't have stages to be on. And so now I'm not just a poet, I'm a storyteller. I do that through media. And it took some grueling audits. We're gonna talk about the audit that took to migrate my artistic practice from stage only to visual, because you have to ask yourself a lot of questions. So if nothing else you get from this, it's the art of curiosity, being curious about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Next slide, please. Oh, we're here. How do I want to be doing? What would I rather be doing? How do I feel after a task or interaction? Is there any task that you do that you're like, I really just hate to do it or don't look forward to it? Sometimes it's checking emails. For a lot of artists, it's our budgeting. It is our paperwork. It's our tax filings. We're going to talk about how can we do that? How can we delegate? One of the things that I think is going to be important in the times that we find ourselves in is learning when to delegate, learning when to say, that's not my work. Or it could be my work, but I think you might be better suited to do it. Or I need some help. We're going to be doing things like that. Why am I doing this in a particular way? Was I taught? Did I assume? And when we talk about feelings that we feel after interactions, it took me a minute to get here because I grew up as a child who was not allowed to feel anger in particular. Anybody else have that experience? I wasn't given permission. Even if I felt it, I wasn't given permission to express it. So I started studying anger as an adult. One thing I've learned about anger and resentment is that they are signs that we need to audit our boundaries. Anytime I feel anger, I recognize that that is a place where I need to reassess a boundary, where I need to say, not okay. And boundaries, for the sake of this conversation, is simply what is okay and what is not okay for you, what you need to be okay. Next slide, please. When we're talking about the process of an audit, some questions you need to ask is, who needs to be in the room? Who are my collaborators? Who are my partners? Who's impacted by this work? What's the goal? Am I consistently making strides towards it? What are our priorities? And what values are driving our course of action? I'm going to give you a prompt later. We're going to conduct some audits, but let's just start thinking about the questions. Next slide, please. A solid audit can reveal patterns and even provide insight into the type of culture that has been cultivated. Actions over time is a pattern. Patterns over time are a culture. Are transactions happening in a culture of fear, entitlement, scarcity, accountability, transparency? Your culture always reflects your collective values. And I'm looking forward to Kathy's conversation this week on values. I feel like this is a precursor to that. And we're going to talk about our culture of roots. We're going to talk about our interpersonal cultures. What is my personal culture? How do I interact in my home, in my artistic practice? One of the values that informs my culture is ethics. I try to do things to where it has the highest good for all involved parties. That is the foundation of my ethics. I am also an involved party, so we're going to talk about how we consider ourselves when we talk about what we do and how we practice our art. Next, please. We're here this week to conduct audits of all types. We're going to be charting a new path forward. I encourage us to constantly be open to change and willing to chart a new path if we must. Next, please. I conduct audits often in my personal practice and in my life. I have learned the consequences of not being curious. I had a situation right around COVID where I wasn't curious and I was very resistant to change. And resistance to change can cost us a lot. We can feel like we're holding on to something in the moment, but let me tell you, I've lost resources, money, energy, because I was resistant to change, or I didn't have a sense of curiosity. And sometimes we have to cultivate that in ourselves. Oftentimes I meet people for one-on-one coaching, and one of the biggest tools that I offer people is just be willing to ask the question. Just be willing to ask the question. When I leaned into tough questions, I found myself more connected with myself, my work, my community, my surroundings, and I feel aligned with who I say I am and who I want to be. I'm 36 years old, and I feel right now that I am the most aligned and connected with who I said I wanted to be. Me 4 years ago, not so much. I had a journey. It took some time getting there. But if I can feel this feeling often, then I feel like I'm doing the good work and following a North Star. Next, please. Now, what are some barriers to connection and alignment? What keeps us from being connected? What keeps the coworker who really grumbles and complains every day at work being there? I want to talk a little bit about that so that we can more importantly talk about how to heal it. Next, please. One thing that keeps us from curiosity, connectedness, is emotional unreadiness. There's a lot of fear. When I have questions, then I have to be ready for the answers, right? Grief, anybody felt grief? Or anticipated grief and avoided it? I have done that where I know that I'm gonna be sad that my podcast that I wanted really bad has to go on the back burner or stay on a hard drive for a while. And if I'm not emotionally prepared to handle that grief, then I will avoid it at all costs. I have a line I wrote in my book, Smoke. Any lie I've ever told is an attempt to avoid grief. And I absolutely believe that when we lie to ourselves, when we live in untruths, it is because we are not reckoning with grief in the way that we need to. Uncertainty is scary. It's a scary beast. Shame. What happens if I create an identity around this particular artistic practice, but I realize it's not fulfilling to me anymore? Am I shamed? Do I feel guilty that I'm not doing the thing for people anymore? Do I feel guilty about how that impacts? And let's keep in mind, emotional work is work. Yes, amen, somebody? That is why we have the Teal team in this space. And that's one of the beautiful things about Roots is that this is a place that acknowledges the weight of emotional labor and how it impacts us and how we move in the world. Capacity and resources. If I audit something and I don't have the time, I ain't got the time to change the breakfast cereal. I don't have the time to redo the hard drives. I don't have time to build a new practice or take new classes or feel like I don't have the resources. That is a barrier. But I often tell people sometimes one thing you have to do is prioritize. We'll talk about that in a second. When I say I don't have time to do something, then I have to think about how important it is to me. So that is often a barrier to connection, not having capacity or resources or not rethinking how we use our capacity and resources. Next slide, please. A need for control and predictability. Y'all don't have to raise your hands because I will. I am a person who needs often control and predictability. I need to know what it's gonna be, and that's my thing. I didn't realize I was anxious so much growing up because of that, but that is one of the things that I've had to part with as an adult. I've had to learn the things that one of my sayings is control the controllables. But what can't be controlled can't be on me. It can't be my weight. And that need can get in the way of progress. Unreadiness to be accountable or be witnessed. If there's a finding that I don't like or a finding where I made a mistake, am I willing to be witnessed in that space? Am I willing to be accountable and say that was my mistake and my bad? And that involves emotional readiness. And unwillingness to play a different role. Artists, I ain't gonna talk to y'all, but I'm talking to us. I'm talking to us. I've been unwilling to play a different role. I'm a person who has lived in the spotlight a lot. Since I was a kid, I've been a performing poet, and then COVID turned me into a manager and producer. And I had to reckon with that. What happens if I'm not on stage or in the spotlight or on the camera? What happens if I'm knee-deep in administration? Am I still an artist there? Am I willing to play a different role for the sake of for a bigger picture? It's only recently that I started writing scripts for other people to perform. So I had to think about, am I ready to do that? Am I ready to not play the role, but to leave it to someone who might be better equipped to do it? And that leads us to identity and attachment. When we're so attached to our roles, that can be in the way of progress, right? I'm doing it because I've been doing it for 20 years. But we have to begin to challenge that if we are going to make progress as artists and as people. We have to get our egos out of the way for the sake of the bigger picture. Fear of conflict. I have a fear of conflict sometimes. I don't like it, I anticipate it. But curiosity is a catalyst for conflict. Anytime we ask questions, anytime we get curious, conflict is almost inevitable because it's going to come up against not only what we've done, but what we think and what we imagine as rightness. Next, please. Being out of touch with our authentic values. What do I really, really, really want? That's one question that I ponder often. What do I really, really want? Not just want or think I want, but deep down, what is my authentic values? And when I'm not acting in alignment with those, then I'm self-abandoning. How many times have we self-abandoned for the sake of a relationship, for the sake of art or performance, or survival or lack-based thinking that this is as good as it gets? Or nothing new is coming. I've done that so often. One of the things that I audit often is my interpersonal relationships. And for a long time, quality time was not one of my love languages. I was like, you can be over there, I can be over here. But over time, it changed, and I realized I needed quality time. So I had to communicate that change, but I had to really dig deep down into my values and who I am. But that also meant that when I was in relationships where I wasn't getting that need met, that I needed to stand up for myself. And I need to speak up and say, hey, this is a thing that I need, so the least I can do is ask. Next, please. So how do we foster connection and alignment? We've talked about the barriers, the things that keep us from doing it. How do we get to where we're going? Next slide, please. One thing we can do is we can build up our energy. We must prioritize connection. Anybody familiar with the term pleasure activism? Yeah, okay, we got some fans in here. Adrienne Maree Brown, a brilliant, brilliant thinker of our time, pleasure activism, which is the idea that folks who are most impacted by racism, classism, sexism, those who are most marginalized, can be activists by pursuing the things that give us pleasure and joy. We can do a lot more of that. We can give ourselves permission to feel joy, especially in nonprofit and movement work. We've got to find joy. That was said last night. We have to figure out how to lead with joy, because oftentimes this is the work where joy is last. And it's oftentimes the work where we feel we get grueling hours. We are doing a lot of work. We're on a lot of Zoom, sorting through a lot of paperwork. But I believe we absolutely have to figure out where our pleasure points are. Rest and breaks. Anybody see siesta on the schedule this year? Yeah. Not just on a daily basis, but on a movement basis. There have been years where I have said, I just can't host a weekly open mic. I need somebody else to do it. I've got other things that I need to tend to, but I'll be back. We have to lean into rest and breaks. Confront fears in small ways. Start with your breakfast routine. I keep bringing that up. I was a person who ate cereal for years. And at a certain point, I was like, why am I eating cereal? Why am I doing this to myself? So now I'm a yogurt girly, or I'm an eggs over avocado toast girly. And the days that I want cereal, I absolutely will lean into that. Have facilitated discussions with those who you partner with. Anybody have strategic partners in work? Romantic partners and all of that? We can start with, sometimes discussions need to be mediated by a trusted party, especially if we haven't developed a culture of curiosity or accountability or bringing things to the table. And we build confidence when we build trust. When we trust the people we're in community with to show up, to try to meet our needs, to increase their capacities, then confidence doesn't make conflict so scary, does it? Next, please. Feel your feelings. There's inevitable grief when we change, when our findings result in a recommendation that involves a shift. Build up resilience to uncertainty by doing your best and following your personal North Stars. I am very, very rarely scared of uncertainty when I know at the core that I'm doing my absolute best and that I'm in alignment with my values. From there, everything else, let's see where the cards lay. Next. Reestablish your agreements. How will you care for yourself when you've missed the mark? Do we care for ourselves when we miss the mark? That is important, especially when we're talking about this week about deep audits, because I've had interpersonal relationships where I've sat down and said, hey, I think we've missed the mark here. And some people just don't have the capacity to hear that. We should be able to increase our capacity, and when we care for each other, we increase our capacity to be held accountable and to be witnessed when we make mistakes. Find worth outside of your role. Yes. Titles change so quickly and so often, but where's our worthiness if we're not in that role? Where's my worthiness if I'm not on stage in the middle of the spotlight? Where's my worthiness if I am behind a laptop and on a computer? Where's my worthiness if I'm moving boom stands and that's not necessarily my job to do? Retain our worthiness regardless of what our role is. Try to compartmentalize information and move as if it's neutral rather than a polarizing judgment. What do you mean by that, Ashlee Haze? Information to me is one of my best friends. But oftentimes information can be scary because it can seem like a judgment. It can seem damning sometimes if the information is we missed the mark. I try to move as if information is just information. It is neutral, and it is up to me to decide what I will do with that information beyond that. I think if we can compartmentalize more in that particular way, then we can get closer to our collective goals. Next, please. Acknowledge and celebrate the moments of alignment. When did we meet the mark? When have we done well? Sarah Green just named out a list of things that we've done well throughout the year. We should be celebrating those. We should be celebrating the fact that we are now to a point of fiscal responsibility and understanding where we are and having a good picture. We should be celebrating the fact that we award artists actual funds and resources that impact their lives. And give yourself permission to live a connected life. I did not know for so long that I was waiting on someone to say it's okay to be better. It's okay to be out of survival. It's okay to thrive. It's okay to rest. It's okay to change your role. We give ourselves permission to live a connected life. That is the key. That gets us there. Next. How do we evaluate our findings and reckon with those recommendations when we're at the end of an audit? Once you're at the end of an audit, it should accompany a list of recommendations. This is what I think you should do going forward. Next slide, please. Gratitude. Gratitude is a signal to yourself, community, God, and the universe that you trust the bigger picture. The very first thing I do when I'm presented with information, especially information I don't like or don't want to hear, is I say thank you. Gratitude will instantly change the energy in a room. It will change the energy in your body. Because when you say thank you for this information, you say, I see that there is a bigger picture. I see that the movement is bigger than me and these mistakes. Information is an invitation. When I get information, it is now an invitation to get curious. What do I need to learn to do better? What do I need Who do I need in the room to make better decisions? Give ourselves and others grace. Grace is absolutely a way that we can reckon with recommendations. Actions will have consequences. We should understand the difference between justice and punishment. If I take an action and in the audit it finds that I made a mistake, let's just say my own personal artistic audit. Maybe I spent too much damn time trying to focus on this one episode of a podcast when we should have done that. There are gonna be consequences for that inevitably. So I don't need someone else to punish me for that. I don't need, I don't need a partner or a collaborator in the room to continue to remind me of that. The consequence is that it was time not spent somewhere else. So we need to learn how to let natural consequences be that, but also not lean into punishment as a response to findings or mistakes. We will have those, but we absolutely should let justice be organic and justice be limited and not bleed into punishment. It should match whatever the mistake was. Thank you for that. I'm like, anybody hear me? What does connection look like? One of my favorite charts to look at is the Japanese concept of the ikigai. Anybody heard of that one before? Ikigai. We're constantly moving between circles here. So the theory is that the ikigai is in the middle. And so on the outer, you have balancing what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And so if you can be paid for it and you're good at it, then that's your profession. If you can be paid for it and it's what the world needs, then that's your vocation. If it's what you love and what the world needs, that's your mission. What you're good at and what you love is your passion. And if all of those can align, your profession, your vocation, your mission, your passion, then you are living in ikigai, which is the ultimate alignment with our North Stars. It is the ultimate alignment between who we say we want to be, who we are, what we get paid for, what we do in the world, what the world needs. We're constantly moving between circles. We're not always going to be in the center. There are some times where I really, really want to be doing what the world needs, but what the world needs, I might not necessarily be paid for. And bills might be very real. So we have to give ourselves permission to flow. But if our North Star is the target of having that sort of alignment, I believe at various points throughout our lives, we will find it. Set a goal for balance and not perfection. But if nothing else, avoid the edges. Try not to only be doing the thing that you're good at if it's not what the world needs. Try not to only be doing what we can be paid for if it's not what we love. We do not want to live at the edges. We want to try to find some overlap in our lives. Next slide, please. And we recommend with recommendations, reckoning with recommendations. Recommendations to follow all audits. Perhaps the recommendation is to keep doing what you're doing. Is that what you want? I've done some audits and been like, even though we're doing great, I don't want to keep doing this. So because it's great work, who else can do it? Who else can step in? When you can wish to chart a new course even when the results are good. You can want to chart a new path just because it's good. I've left a decent relationship before. If the recommendation is to pivot or redirect, sit with that. Be open to new possibilities. Remember your bigger picture. Grieve what you need to. You have the option to reject change, but remember those consequences are inevitable. If we reject change that is needed, if we reject change that leads us to alignment, we'll feel it at some point. So keep that in mind. I prefer to try to get it out the way. One of my sayings is fail fast. Let's fail fast. Let's get it out the way now. Amen. Next. I am my first auditor. I told y'all I was thinking all the time, but now it's more auditing my inner world, auditing what I'm doing. When you know your strengths and opportunities for growth, you have a good sense of your own current state, then you're not easily misled. There are some things people can tell me, and I'm like, yeah, actually I agree. I did an internal audit, and I agree with your findings. But you can't bring me no mess. There's some things you're just not gonna be able to accuse me of, you know what I mean? It's because I have a good sense of self, so I encourage you to develop that so that when you are in an audit, you know where you're starting from. I try to beat people to bad news whenever it's possible. If somebody's like, we need to talk, usually I'm like, I agree. I agree. It is not usually surprising to me, very rarely. Now, I don't try to anticipate people in that particular way, but if we're all doing our internal audits, we should be getting to similar information around similar times, which makes tough conversations easier. If I have to have a tough conversation with my supervisor and be like, hey, I realized I dropped the ball on this. How much more impactful is that? Especially if I've already built up the resilience to the conflict. It is never too late to learn, to pivot, to take a break, to clock in, and to grow. If you remember nothing else, remember that. It is never too late. You can pick any moment to change, to grow, to clock in, to get into the work that we have in, and to take a break if you need it. Next. Integrity for me is a North Star. One of my favorite quotes on integrity is Brené Brown. Integrity is choosing courage over our comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. It is an absolute alignment of our actions with who we say we are, with what we say our values are. Next, please. It's a prompt. I love giving prompts because I'm a writer. I don't expect you all to do this now, but take a picture of the prompt, think about it, ponder it throughout the week. We're going to start with a personal audit of your time, energy, and resources. Answer the following questions. Where do your resources go? Who gets the biggest slice of your pies? What actions do you find unfulfilling or not showing growth? What are the potential outcomes in investing in something that's not showing growth? Sometimes it needs an investment. Sometimes it needs a divestment. Think about the consequences if we pull back, if we chart a new path. What actions are working and bearing fruit? Does the idea of doing more of that bring you joy? Is someone else equipped to step in even if it doesn't? I've had jobs that were making great bank, making a lot of money, working for the government, working for the U.S. government, working for local government. Did I want to keep doing that? Was it bringing me joy? No. Let me help you find your replacement so that I can do more of what the world needs and more of what brings me joy and see if I can get some money doing that. So this is the start of a personal audit. Take this with you. Think about it. Next, please. Looking forward. In the fall, I want to start auditing Roots programs, Roots Week, artistic assistance. Why do we do what we currently do? Who needs to be in the room? Where do we need to invest? Where do we need to divest? What values will we lean into? We'll be talking about that on a Roots scale this week. The programs I work and in charge of are Roots Week and artistic assistance. Anybody here from the Roots Week work group? We have been asking those questions already, and it has been so fantastic. I'm learning so much about the history of Roots Week as we go into our 50th. But I think it's a good time to ask questions. Anybody else agree?
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good time to ask questions. And we may land in a similar structure to what we have, but we owe it to ourselves to be curious and to figure out where we're headed for the next 50. Next slide, please. What worked then may not work now. Tools such as resting and redirecting are powerful on a micro and a macro level. Redirecting at home, redirecting your practice, redirecting your nonprofits, they can be powerful. And as we all know and sung early, we go further together. I believe that freedom cannot be achieved in a vacuum. We need partnerships, connections, collaborations. We must be open to the informed input of those who we trust to achieve our goals. So we go together. We don't go alone, ever. Next, please. Thank y'all. Thank you. You can find me at ashleehaze.com. Thank you. You can find me at ashleehaze.com. And if you want to continue education beyond this moment, I highly recommend Pleasure Activism, a book by Adrienne Marie Brown. I highly recommend Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. They are folks who do work in the world about achieving the ideals that we're talking about, achieving liberation in our social interactions and on a broader scale. So thank you all so much. It has been a pleasure. Alternate Roots. Thank you.